Welcome back to Read a Book a Day. Today, we're diving into a game-changing book that will revolutionize the way you approach learning. Scott Young's Ultralearning shows us how to master complex skills faster than we ever thought possible. Whether you want to learn a new language, pick up a musical instrument, or accelerate your career skills, this book lays out a powerful roadmap to help you achieve it. Stick around as we break down the core principles of ultralearning and show you how to apply them in your own life. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Can you get an MIT education without going to MIT? Imagine embarking on a journey to achieve the equivalent of an MIT education without ever stepping foot in MIT. In this opening chapter, we dive into the remarkable story of Scott Young, the author of this book, who dared to ask the question, can I complete MIT's 4-year computer science curriculum in just 12 months all by myself using free online resources? The answer, as we'll see, is a resounding yes, but not without challenges, lessons, and a unique approach to learning that can inspire anyone to embark on their own educational journey. Scott's idea was bold. He wanted to replicate the experience of an MIT education using their freely available materials and see if he could not just learn but thrive, demonstrating mastery over the material by passing real exams and completing rigorous projects. The challenge began in 2011 when he discovered that MIT had released virtually all its coursework for free through MIT OpenCourseWare. This meant that anyone with an internet connection could access the same lectures, assignments, and exams that MIT students were using. But here's the catch. Merely accessing the materials wasn't enough. To gain the full depth of understanding and expertise, Scott had to devise his own system for staying accountable, managing time, and maintaining focus over an entire year. This project would test not only his learning skills, but also his discipline and perseverance. The three main challenges: self-paced learning. Unlike students in a traditional university setting, Scott had no professors checking in, no fixed schedule, and no classmates to keep him on track. This level of independence meant that he had to design his own learning plan, ensure consistent progress, and be his own motivator. Focus and discipline. Without the structure of a formal program, keeping focused on learning became a real challenge. There were days when motivation waned, but Scott learned early on that staying on task meant breaking down big goals into manageable daily chunks. He treated his education like a job, logging in study hours regularly. Evaluation and accountability. To truly know if he was mastering the material, Scott did more than just watch lectures. He took all the exams under timed conditions, completed all the problem sets, and built projects. He even publicly shared his progress, inviting his audience to hold him accountable. The outcome. By the end of 12 months, Scott had completed 33 MIT courses, passed numerous exams, and built a portfolio of projects that rivaled those of actual MIT students. His experiment became a testament to the power of self-directed learning and the vast opportunities offered by the internet in today's educational landscape. This chapter not only sets up the foundation for the rest of the book, but also asks us to reconsider the barriers we often place around learning. Scott's journey shows that it is possible to achieve remarkable things if you are willing to structure your learning, stay focused, and constantly test yourself. Key points of Chapter 1. Scott Young's Challenge. Scott aimed to complete MIT's 4-year computer science curriculum in 1 year using free online resources like MIT OpenCourseWare. Self-directed learning. Without formal guidance, Scott had to develop his own methods to stay disciplined, motivated, and accountable throughout the process. Focus on mastery. Scott ensured that his learning wasn't just passive. He completed exams, problem sets, and real-world projects to verify his mastery of the material. Power of online education. This chapter highlights the immense potential of free educational resources, showcasing that with discipline and proper planning, anyone can achieve a top-tier education. Redefining education. Scott's journey is a prime example of how traditional education systems are no longer the only path to acquiring knowledge, skills, or career success. This chapter serves as a motivational start to the book, encouraging readers to think beyond traditional learning and embrace ultralearning as a powerful tool to unlock their potential. Chapter 2. Why Ultralearning Matters. We live in a world that rewards those who can adapt, learn quickly, and master complex skills. In this chapter, Scott Young explains why the ability to learn is not just a competitive edge, it's becoming a survival skill in today's fast-evolving global landscape. Whether you're a student, professional, or just someone with a curiosity for self-improvement, understanding why ultralearning matters could be the difference between stagnation and thriving. The concept of ultralearning is simple but profound. It's a self-directed, aggressive approach to mastering hard skills quickly and efficiently. In this chapter, Scott delves into the broader implications of why learning effectively and with intensity is crucial in a world that's moving faster than ever before. The accelerating pace of change. Scott introduces a critical idea. Industries are changing at such a rapid pace that the traditional paths to success, like formal education or apprenticeships, are no longer enough. Jobs that once had a life expectancy of decades are now evolving or disappearing within years. People need to continually upgrade their skills to stay relevant. This fast-paced change isn't just affecting the tech industry, it's happening across all fields. Whether you're a lawyer, marketer, or engineer, you are competing in a world where new technologies, tools, and ideas can disrupt your field overnight. Therefore, mastering the art of learning is not a luxury, but a necessity. Ultralearning versus conventional learning. Scott contrasts ultralearning with more conventional approaches to education. Traditional learning, like attending school or college, often involves a passive approach, listening to lectures, reading textbooks, and preparing for exams. This slower, more drawn-out process has its place, but it's no longer the only option, especially when time and adaptability are crucial. Ultralearning flips this script. It's intense, hands-on, and focused. Instead of waiting years to develop expertise, ultralearners tackle complex subjects head-on and achieve deep mastery much faster by honing in on specific methods that promote rapid understanding. The key is taking charge of your own learning, rather than relying on institutions or teachers to guide you. The importance of continuous learning. Ultralearning isn't just for career changers or ambitious go-getters. It's a skill everyone should have. Scott cites examples of companies that value continuous learning and self-improvement as essential qualities in their employees. Companies like Google or Apple no longer solely care about what degree you have. They care about what you can do and how quickly you can learn new skills to solve problems. By mastering ultralearning techniques, individuals can not only keep up with their peers, but often surpass them. The chapter stresses that continuous self-education is no longer optional in many industries. It's a requirement for long-term success. Learning for personal fulfillment. Beyond the professional realm, ultralearning offers personal satisfaction. Scott introduces the idea that learning can bring joy and fulfillment in life. Whether it's learning a new language, mastering a musical instrument, or diving deep into a hobby, the process of ultralearning can enrich your personal life. It brings a sense of achievement and allows you to explore the full potential of your mind. The world of ultralearning is filled with stories of individuals who pushed the boundaries of what they thought was possible, discovering new abilities and insights in the process. This chapter opens the door for anyone who wants to take control of their learning journey and transform it into something powerful, efficient, and incredibly rewarding. Key points of Chapter 2. The world is changing rapidly. The pace of technological and industrial change requires constant learning and adaptation to stay relevant and competitive. Ultralearning is self-directed. Unlike traditional learning, ultralearning is intense, aggressive, and puts the learner in control, allowing for faster mastery of complex topics. Outpacing conventional education. The traditional approach to education is often too slow to keep up with the modern world's demands. Ultralearning allows you to achieve high levels of skill and knowledge much faster. Critical for career growth. Many top companies value the ability to learn quickly over formal education. Ultralearning skills make you a more valuable asset in any profession. Personal satisfaction. Beyond professional needs, ultralearning can bring personal joy and fulfillment, allowing individuals to explore new hobbies and interests with depth and passion. This chapter sets the foundation for why the rest of the book is important. highlighting the urgency of developing ultra-learning strategies to thrive in both personal and professional spheres. Chapter 3: How to Become an Ultra-Learner. In this chapter, Scott Young shifts from the why of ultra-learning to the how. If ultra-learning sounds intriguing but you're unsure how to begin, this chapter lays out a roadmap. It's not just about working harder, but working smarter. Scott emphasizes that anyone can adopt ultra-learning principles, but it takes the right mindset and a commitment to effective strategies. The core of ultra-learning is efficiency, learning faster, deeper, and with greater retention. But how exactly does one achieve this? Scott introduces several strategies that will help you take control of your own learning journey, no matter what subject you're tackling. Self-direction, taking charge of your learning. Scott begins by emphasizing the most important principle of ultra-learning. It is self-directed. Unlike traditional learning environments where teachers guide you through a curriculum, ultra-learners are responsible for designing their own learning paths. This can be both liberating and challenging. The freedom to choose what, how, and when you learn puts you in the driver's seat, but it also demands discipline and resourcefulness. To become an ultra-learner, you need to start by identifying what you want to learn and why it matters to you. Is it a skill that will advance your career? A personal interest you've always wanted to master? This clarity of purpose helps to fuel your motivation and keep you focused through the tough times. The 3 core strategies for ultra-learning. Scott breaks down ultra-learning into 3 core strategies that make the process more efficient and effective. Focus on the right material. Ultra-learners don't waste time on information that doesn't contribute directly to their goal. They identify the critical aspects of a subject and drill down on those. For example, if you're learning a new language, rather than trying to memorize an entire dictionary, you would focus on the most frequently used words and phrases that will help you communicate effectively. Active recall and testing. One of the most effective ways to lock in knowledge is to actively test yourself, rather than passively rereading notes or watching lectures. Ultra-learners embrace this idea by constantly challenging themselves to recall and apply what they've learned. Scott explains that testing helps strengthen memory and understanding, even if it feels uncomfortable. It's better to struggle in practice than to fail during real-world application. Spaced repetition. Rather than cramming all learning into one session, ultra-learners use spaced repetition to enhance retention. This technique involves reviewing information over increasingly longer intervals, ensuring that it sticks in long-term memory. Scott points out that ultra-learners don't just aim for short-term results. They want to retain their skills and knowledge for the long haul. Deliberate practice, the secret to skill mastery. One of the key insights in this chapter is that ultra-learning is much like the concept of deliberate practice, which has been shown to be a critical factor in achieving expertise. Deliberate practice involves focusing on your weakest points, seeking feedback, and continuously refining your approach. Scott shares examples of ultra-learners who embraced deliberate practice to make massive strides in their fields. These individuals didn't just put in hours of work. They made sure that every minute was focused on improving their core skills, learning from their mistakes, and pushing beyond their comfort zones. This kind of targeted, intentional practice is what sets ultra-learners apart from those who simply put in the time but don't make progress. Creating a plan for ultra-learning. To start your own ultra-learning project, Scott suggests breaking it down into manageable phases. Research the subject. Start by gathering information about the subject or skill you want to learn. Look for high-quality resources, including books, online courses, and expert advice. This initial research helps you map out the scope of your project and identify the best learning materials. Set clear goals. Define exactly what you want to achieve. Your goals should be specific and measurable, like build a basic website in 30 days, or have a 15-minute conversation in Spanish by the end of the month. Vague goals like learn programming won't provide the structure you need to succeed. Develop a schedule. Time management is crucial. Create a study plan that outlines when and how much time you'll dedicate to your learning. It's important to stay consistent, but also to remain flexible enough to adjust as you go along. Stay accountable, whether through public accountability, like Scott did with his MIT challenge, or by sharing your progress with a friend. Having some form of accountability can keep you on track. This chapter encourages you to find ways to stay motivated even when the going gets tough. The importance of feedback. One of the major takeaways from this chapter is the value of feedback. Ultralearners actively seek feedback, whether it's from mentors, peers, or their own self-assessment. The sooner you identify mistakes, the faster you can correct them and improve. Scott explains that while feedback can sometimes be uncomfortable, it is an essential part of the ultralearning process. The key is to embrace feedback, not fear it. Key points of Chapter 3. Self-direction is crucial. Ultralearning requires you to take full control of your learning process, from setting goals to choosing resources. Focus on what matters. Identify the most important parts of a subject and spend the majority of your time mastering them. Don't get lost in irrelevant details. Active recall and spaced repetition. Testing yourself and reviewing material at spaced intervals ensures deep learning and long-term retention of information. Deliberate practice is key. Focus on your weaknesses, seek feedback, and practice with purpose. Progress is made by refining your approach through targeted efforts. Plan and stay accountable. Create a detailed learning plan, set clear goals, and ensure you have mechanisms in place to stay motivated and on track. This chapter offers the first real glimpse into the practical side of ultralearning, providing readers with the tools they need to begin their own learning projects and succeed in any field they choose. Chapter 4, Principle 1, Meta-learning. In this chapter, Scott introduces the first principle of ultralearning, meta-learning, the strategy of learning how to learn before you dive into a new subject. Imagine embarking on a journey with a map in hand. You wouldn't want to get lost halfway through. Meta-learning is that map helping you navigate the learning process by first understanding the structure and key components of what you're going to learn. By mastering this first principle, you can save time, stay focused, and dramatically improve your learning efficiency. Meta-learning, or learning about learning, is the foundation upon which ultralearning is built. Scott emphasizes that before jumping into the deep end of a new subject, you need to take a step back and assess what you're getting into. This preparation phase allows you to identify the best strategies, tools, and techniques needed to succeed in your learning journey. The meta-learning framework. Scott outlines a three-part framework for approaching meta-learning, which involves understanding three key questions about your subject. What should you learn? The first step in meta-learning is identifying the knowledge and skills that are most crucial to mastering your subject. In every field, certain concepts or abilities are more important than others. For instance, if you're learning a new language, grammar and vocabulary may be foundational, but if you're learning to code, mastering syntax and problem solving will take precedence. Scott recommends focusing your efforts on the 20% of skills or knowledge that will give you 80% of the results. This is often referred to as the Pareto principle. How should you learn it? Once you know what to learn, the next question is how to learn it. Scott explains that every subject has different optimal learning methods. For example, language learners benefit from immersion and speaking practice, while programmers need hands-on coding challenges. Meta-learning helps you uncover the best techniques for your subject, ensuring that your learning is as effective as possible. Why are you learning it? Understanding the why behind your learning helps keep you motivated and on track. Are you learning for professional advancement, personal interest, or practical necessity? Knowing your purpose will fuel your commitment and guide your decisions about how much time and effort to invest. How to do meta-learning research. Meta-learning begins with research. Scott suggests that before diving into a new subject, spend 10% of your total learning time figuring out how to approach it. This phase involves gathering information from books, online resources, and experts. Start by looking for success stories, people who have mastered the skill you want to learn. What strategies did they use? What mistakes did they avoid? Often, you can shortcut your learning process by following proven methods rather than reinventing the wheel. Scott also recommends studying textbooks, forums, and online courses to get a sense of how the subject is traditionally taught and how you can optimize those methods. The importance of directness. One key insight from this chapter is that ultra-learners prioritize direct learning. This means focusing on the specific tasks and skills you will need in real-life applications. For instance, if you're learning public speaking, you'll benefit more from practicing speeches in front of people than from reading books about rhetoric. By directly engaging with the skill, you make faster and more meaningful progress. Scott argues that a lot of traditional education wastes time on indirect learning, like memorizing abstract theories that may never be applied. Ultralearners, on the other hand, seek out methods that align directly with how they will use the knowledge or skill in the real world. Case study: Benny Lewis, language learning through meta-learning. Scott introduces the case of Benny Lewis, an ultralearner who taught himself several languages using meta-learning principles. Rather than following the traditional route of studying grammar and vocabulary in a classroom, Benny focused on speaking from day one. His strategy was to immerse himself in conversations, even with limited knowledge, and gradually build up his fluency. Benny's success demonstrates the power of focusing on real-world application and direct practice, guided by meta-learning. Building a meta-learning map. Scott suggests creating a meta-learning map for every project. This map outlines what to focus on first, the core concepts and skills that will make the biggest impact. The best learning methods, tailored techniques that will help you absorb the material more effectively, common challenges and solutions, potential obstacles, and how to overcome them based on the experience of others who have mastered the subject. By having a clear plan from the outset, you avoid wasting time on irrelevant details and can dive straight into the heart of the subject. Adjusting your meta-learning as you go. Meta-learning is not a one-time activity. As you progress through your learning journey, you should continuously refine your meta-learning strategy. If you discover new resources or techniques that are more effective, incorporate them. If you hit a roadblock, revisit your meta-learning map and adjust your approach. Flexibility is key to maintaining momentum and ensuring you're always working towards your goals. Key points of Chapter 4. Meta-learning is the foundation of ultralearning. Before diving into any subject, spend time understanding the structure of the knowledge and skills you need to master. The meta-learning framework. Focus on 3 key questions. What should you learn? How should you learn it? Why are you learning it? This framework ensures clarity and purpose in your learning journey. Research before you start. Spend 10% of your total learning time researching how to approach the subject, gathering insights from experts and successful learners. Prioritize direct learning. Focus on methods that simulate real-world applications and avoid indirect, abstract learning that doesn't align with your goals. Meta-learning is ongoing. Continuously refine your strategy as you progress. Adjust your learning methods and priorities based on feedback and new discoveries. This chapter sets the stage for an effective ultra-learning journey by showing how proper preparation, guided by meta-learning, can accelerate your progress and make your learning more targeted and efficient. Chapter VI, Principle 2, Focus. Focus is the second principle of ultralearning and one of the most crucial elements of success in any learning endeavor. In this chapter, Scott Young explains how mastering focus allows you to make the most of your study time, avoid distractions, and push through mental resistance. While distractions are everywhere, ultralearners learn to fight back and create deep, uninterrupted periods of concentration. This chapter shows how anyone can develop the mental discipline to stay on track. Focus is often seen as a simple concept. Just pay attention, right? But as Scott explains, in practice, staying focused, especially for long periods, can be one of the hardest parts of learning. In the digital age, with notifications, emails, and endless entertainment just a click away, learning how to focus deeply is a superpower. The challenge of maintaining focus. Scott opens by addressing a common problem we all face. Our minds are constantly bombarded with distractions. Whether it's social media, incoming texts, or just the mental noise of everyday life, staying focused on one task for an extended period has become increasingly difficult. Yet, to learn deeply, we need to engage in sustained, intense focus, something that allows us to reach a state of flow, where we are fully immersed in what we are doing. ultralearners not only recognize the value of focus, but actively cultivate it. In this chapter, Scott shares strategies for building focus and avoiding the pitfalls that lead to scattered attention. The two types of focus. Scott introduces two types of focus. Intensive focus. This is the ability to concentrate deeply on a task for a sustained period. It's about dedicating your full attention to what you're learning, blocking out everything else. Intensive focus is the key to mastering difficult or complex subjects because it allows you to tackle challenging material head-on without distraction. Sustained focus. This refers to your ability to maintain focus over the long term. Instead of working in short bursts, sustained focus means keeping your attention on a subject or skill for weeks, months, or even years. This long-term dedication is critical in ultralearning projects that demand a deep dive into complex material. Scott emphasizes that both forms of focus are essential for ultralearning. You need the ability to intensely concentrate in the short term and stay committed in the long run. Strategies for boosting focus. Scott offers several strategies to help you improve focus and overcome distractions. Create a focus-friendly environment. The first step is to build an environment that minimizes distractions. Whether that's a quiet room, a library, or even just using noise-canceling headphones, your surroundings play a huge role in your ability to focus. Scott recommends setting up a dedicated space for learning and removing anything that might pull your attention away. Set clear time blocks. Scott introduces the idea of time blocking, where you set aside specific chunks of time dedicated solely to focused work. During these blocks, you eliminate all interruptions, no checking phones, emails, or social media. By establishing clear boundaries for focused work, you're training your brain to concentrate during those periods. Use the Pomodoro technique. One popular method Scott suggests is the Pomodoro technique, which involves working for 25 minutes, followed by a 5-minute break. This method helps build short bursts of focus while preventing burnout. Over time, you can increase the length of your focus sessions as your concentration improves. Eliminate multitasking. Multitasking is the enemy of deep focus. Scott stresses that switching between tasks, e.g. checking email while studying, significantly reduces productivity. True learning requires your full, undivided attention on a single task. Practice mindfulness and meditation. To improve focus, Scott highlights the value of mindfulness and meditation. These practices train your brain to stay present, making it easier to resist distractions. Even a few minutes of meditation per day can help you build the mental discipline needed for ultralearning. Overcoming mental resistance. One of the biggest challenges to focus is not just external distractions, but internal mental resistance. Scott explains that when you're learning something difficult, your brain may want to avoid the discomfort by wandering off or seeking easier, more enjoyable activities. This is particularly common with ultralearning, where the material can be complex and mentally taxing. Scott suggests pushing through this resistance by gradually building your focus muscles. Start with shorter, easier sessions, and as your ability to concentrate strengthens, extend your focus time. The goal is to train your mind to handle longer periods of deep work without constantly seeking distractions. Flow, the state of optimal focus. Scott discusses flow, a state of total immersion where time seems to fly by and you are completely absorbed in the task at hand. Achieving flow is often the key to productive learning sessions because it enables you to dive deep into the subject and make faster progress. While flow can't always be achieved on command, you can create the right conditions by reducing distractions, working on challenging but manageable tasks, and setting clear goals. Case study: Nigel Richards, World Scrabble Champion. To illustrate the power of focus, Scott shares the story of Nigel Richards, a world champion Scrabble player. Richards is known for his incredible ability to memorize vast numbers of words, many of which are obscure or uncommon in everyday language. His success stems from his ability to focus intensely for long periods, memorizing word lists and patterns. Richards' focus was so sharp that he managed to win the French Scrabble World Championship without speaking French, proving that dedication to focus and deliberate practice can lead to remarkable achievements. Managing your energy for maximum focus. Focus is not just about mental discipline, it's also about managing your energy. Scott explains that our ability to concentrate depends on our physical and mental well-being. Factors like sleep, nutrition, exercise, and stress management all influence how well we can focus. By taking care of your body, you're better equipped to engage in deep, productive focus sessions. Key points of Chapter 5. 2 types of focus. Ultralearning requires both intensive focus, deep concentration in the short term, and sustained focus, commitment over the long term. Eliminate distractions. Create an environment that minimizes distractions and commit to time blocks where you can focus solely on learning. Mindfulness and meditation. These practices help train your brain to stay present, improving your ability to resist distractions. Overcome mental resistance. Mental resistance is natural, especially when tackling difficult material. Gradually build your focus muscles by starting small and working up to longer periods of deep concentration. Flow and energy management. Achieving flow is the optimal state of focus, but it requires managing your energy levels through proper sleep, nutrition, and exercise. This chapter equips readers with the tools and strategies needed to cultivate focus, which is crucial for any ultralearning project. By developing the ability to concentrate deeply and sustain focus over time, you set yourself up for long-term success in mastering new skills and knowledge. Chapter 6, Principle 3, Directness. In this chapter, Scott Young delves into directness, the third principle of ultralearning. Directness is the art of learning in a way that mirrors how you will use the skill in real life. Instead of theoretical knowledge or indirect learning, ultralearners focus on practical application from the start. Scott explains how learning directly, by doing the real thing, helps you master skills faster and more efficiently, cutting through the distractions of irrelevant information. What is directness? Scott begins by defining directness as the process of learning something in the exact way you will eventually use it. Too often, traditional education focuses on abstract theories or hypothetical examples that don't align with real-world usage. For ultralearners, the key to mastery is engaging directly with the material in a practical, hands-on way from the beginning. For example, if you want to learn to speak a new language, it's more effective to practice conversations with native speakers than to spend months memorizing vocabulary lists. If you want to learn programming, you should start building projects rather than just reading textbooks about coding principles. Direct learning cuts out the middleman, helping you develop a functional understanding that can be applied immediately. The pitfalls of indirect learning. Scott explains that many learners get stuck in indirect learning, which involves learning through methods that are not directly related to how the skill will be used. For example, students might spend years studying business theory but struggle to run a business in practice. Why? Because they never engage directly with the challenges of starting and managing a business. Indirect learning often feels safer because it allows learners to build theoretical knowledge without the fear of making mistakes. But this comfort zone is a trap. The real world is messy, and ultralearners thrive by exposing themselves to that mess early and often. The transfer problem. One of the reasons directness is so important is because of what Scott calls the transfer problem. This refers to the difficulty of applying knowledge learned in one context to a different context. For example, you might be able to solve math problems in a classroom, but struggle to use those same principles to solve real-world problems in engineering or physics. The more abstract and indirect your learning is, the harder it becomes to transfer that knowledge when the context changes. Direct learning reduces the transfer problem by practicing the skill exactly as it will be used, ensuring you build the connections needed to apply it across different situations. Case study: Benny Lewis, fluent in language by speaking from day one. Scott revisits Benny Lewis, the language learning expert from earlier chapters, as a perfect example of someone who embraced direct learning. Instead of relying on grammar books and language theory, Benny jumped straight into conversations in his target language from the very first day. By putting himself in real-world situations where he had to use the language, Benny was able to learn much faster and more effectively than traditional classroom learners. His success wasn't due to perfect preparation or vast knowledge of vocabulary. It was due to his willingness to engage in real conversations, make mistakes, and learn from them. This is the essence of directness, learning by doing. Direct learning techniques. Scott shares several techniques for implementing direct learning in any subject. Project-based learning. One of the best ways to engage in direct learning is to work on real projects. If you're learning a new skill, create a project that forces you to apply what you're learning in a practical way. For example, if you're studying graphic design, create a portfolio of designs rather than just reading about design theory. Immersion. Immersing yourself in an environment where you must use the skill is another effective approach. For language learners, this might mean living in a country where the language is spoken. For a programmer, it might mean working on real-world coding projects where the stakes are higher than just classroom exercises. Simulations. While real-world practice is ideal, simulations can also provide valuable direct learning opportunities. For instance, if you're studying medicine but can't yet treat patients, practicing in a medical simulation lab helps bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and real application. Case studies and role-playing. In some fields, you can benefit from role-playing real-world scenarios. For example, business students can role-play negotiations or decision-making exercises, and lawyers might practice mock trials. This helps learners engage directly with the practical realities of their field, even if they aren't in those roles yet. Direct feedback. A significant advantage of direct learning is that it comes with immediate feedback. When you engage in a real-world task, the results are clear. You either succeed or fail, and you can learn from both outcomes. Scott emphasizes that feedback is crucial because it helps you identify mistakes and course-correct in real time, speeding up the learning process. For example, if you're learning to play the guitar by performing live, you'll immediately know when you hit the wrong note or fumble a chord. This feedback allows you to correct your mistakes faster than if you were just practicing alone without any real-world pressure. Overcoming the fear of directness. One of the reasons many people shy away from direct learning is because it involves risk. Whether it's the fear of failing, making mistakes, or looking foolish, direct learning puts you in uncomfortable situations where you're not fully prepared. But as Scott explains, this discomfort is necessary for growth. To overcome this fear, Scott suggests starting small. You don't have to dive into the deep end immediately. Begin by creating low-stakes situations where you can apply the skill in a real-world context. As you grow more comfortable, you can increase the complexity and challenge of the direct learning tasks. Case study. Eric Barone, Stardew Valley's one-man creation. A fascinating example of direct learning comes from Eric Barone, the creator of the popular video game Stardew Valley. Eric, who had no formal background in game development, decided to create a full game by himself. He learned everything he needed, coding, design, music composition, by directly applying his skills to the game's development. Instead of taking courses and studying game theory, he learned through doing, solving real problems as they arose in his project. By the time Stardew Valley was released, Eric had not only learned how to make a game, he had created a commercial hit, combining direct and indirect learning. While direct learning is powerful, Scott acknowledges that some indirect learning can be useful, especially when you're dealing with complex subjects that require a foundation of knowledge. The key is to balance both approaches. Use direct learning as much as possible to build practical skills, but supplement it with indirect learning when needed to deepen your understanding or clarify complex ideas. Key points of Chapter 6. Directness means learning by doing. Engage in tasks that mirror the real-world application of the skill you're trying to learn. This method ensures faster and deeper mastery. Avoid indirect learning. Don't get stuck in theoretical or abstract learning. Focus on the practical side of your subject to minimize the transfer problem, which makes it harder to apply knowledge in real-life scenarios. Use project-based learning and immersion. Work on real projects and immerse yourself in environments where you must use the skill. Simulations and role-playing can also be valuable. Feedback is essential. Direct learning provides immediate feedback, which allows you to correct mistakes quickly and improve more efficiently. Overcome the fear of directness. Embrace the discomfort that comes with learning by doing. Start small and gradually build up to more challenging tasks. This chapter highlights the importance of direct learning in achieving mastery quickly and effectively. By focusing on real-world application, you bypass the pitfalls of indirect learning and build the practical skills you need to succeed in any field. Chapter 7, Principle 4, Drill. In this chapter, Scott Young introduces drill, the fourth principle of ultralearning. Drills are focused exercises designed to target specific weaknesses in your knowledge or skill set. While directness helps you engage in real-world practice, drills are essential for sharpening your skills and tackling the areas where you struggle most. In this chapter, Scott explains how ultralearners use drills to isolate and conquer their learning bottlenecks, leading to faster mastery and improved performance. What is a drill? Drills are targeted, intensive exercises that focus on specific components of a skill or subject. Instead of practicing the entire skill at once, you isolate and work on the parts where you need the most improvement. This method of breaking down complex tasks into manageable pieces allows you to improve your weakest areas more efficiently. Scott compares this approach to the way athletes train. A basketball player doesn't just play full games, they also practice free throws, dribbling, and other skills in isolation. Musicians, too, will drill scales and tricky passages to improve their overall performance. By focusing on weak points, you can make significant progress faster than if you only engaged in the entire skill at once. Why drills matter? Ultralearners recognize that not all parts of a skill or subject are created equal. Some areas are more difficult or more critical than others. Drills allow you to focus on these tough spots, ensuring that you can break through plateaus and achieve mastery in a shorter amount of time. For example, if you're learning a language and struggling with pronunciation, a drill might involve repeating difficult sounds or words over and over again. If you're learning to code, you might drill specific algorithms or problem-solving techniques that challenge you. The idea is to zero in on your weaknesses and drill them until they become strengths. Designing effective drills. Scott emphasizes that not all drills are created equal. To be effective, your drills must be well-designed and purposeful. Here's how ultralearners create effective drills. Isolate the problem. Start by identifying the exact area where you're struggling. The more specific you can be, the better. For instance, instead of saying, "I'm bad at math," identify the particular concept or operation that trips you up, such as solving quadratic equations or understanding integrals. Target your weakness. Once you've pinpointed the problem, design a drill that forces you to practice that specific skill. If you're struggling with rhythm on the piano, your drill might involve practicing difficult rhythm patterns over and over. If vocabulary is your issue in a foreign language, create flashcards with challenging words and quiz yourself regularly. Make it repetitive. Drills are most effective when they involve repetition. Scott explains that by drilling something repeatedly, you develop muscle memory, both mental and physical, which helps the skill become automatic over time. Increase the challenge. Gradually. Start with simple drills that build confidence, then gradually increase the difficulty. This allows you to develop the skill incrementally without overwhelming yourself. As you improve, make the drills harder to push your limits and continue growing. The power of feedback loops. One of the key benefits of drills is the immediate feedback they provide. When you isolate a specific weakness and drill it, you get direct feedback on your performance, allowing you to adjust and improve. Scott emphasizes the importance of this feedback loop in accelerating learning. The faster you can get feedback on your mistakes, the faster you can fix them. Ultralearners thrive on feedback. Whether it's from a mentor, a test, or the results of a drill, feedback helps learners identify where they're going wrong and how to correct it. Drills are a natural way to get this kind of feedback quickly and effectively. Case study: Benjamin Franklin, a master of writing drills. Scott uses the example of Benjamin Franklin, one of the greatest thinkers in American history, to illustrate the power of drills. Franklin was an autodidact who taught himself to write by using drills. As a young man, he admired the writing style of The Spectator, a popular British magazine. To improve his writing, Franklin developed a series of drills. He would read an article, take notes on its main points, and then attempt to rewrite it in his own words. After waiting a few days, he would compare his version to the original to see where he had missed the mark. He also rearranged the notes he took into different orders, forcing himself to think critically about structure and flow. These drills helped Franklin hone his writing style, making him a more effective communicator and thinker. The precision of his drills allowed him to focus on exactly where he needed improvement, a technique that can be applied to any field. Balancing drills and direct practice. While drills are incredibly effective for isolating weaknesses, Scott stresses that they must be balanced with direct practice. If you spend all your time drilling specific skills, you may miss out on the broader context in which those skills are used. For example, a basketball player who only practices free throws may struggle in actual games because they haven't worked on other elements of the sport. The key is to use drills to sharpen specific skills while also engaging in direct practice to apply those skills in real-world scenarios. This balance ensures that you're not just improving individual components, but also integrating them into your overall mastery of the subject or skill. Creative drills for difficult skills. Scott shares creative ideas for drills that can be applied to a variety of subjects. Language learning. If you struggle with listening comprehension in a new language, try watching foreign language TV shows with subtitles, then gradually remove the subtitles as your understanding improves. Public speaking. To improve public speaking, create drills where you practice short speeches in front of a mirror or record yourself. Focus on one element at a time, voice projection, body language, or pacing, until you feel confident. Mathematics. Struggling with a specific type of math problem? Drill the same type of problem repeatedly with increasing difficulty until you can solve it with ease. For added feedback, have someone else review your work. Programming. If debugging code is your weak point, create drills where you practice fixing broken code or identifying common errors. This will help sharpen your problem-solving skills in programming. The power of overlearning. Scott introduces the concept of overlearning, which involves drilling a skill far beyond the point of basic proficiency. Overlearning ensures that the skill becomes second nature, allowing you to perform it effortlessly, even under pressure. This is particularly useful for skills that need to be applied quickly and accurately, such as playing an instrument, delivering a speech, or responding to rapid-fire questions in an interview. By overlearning, ultralearners ensure that their skills are deeply ingrained, reducing the likelihood of failure in high-pressure situations. Key points of Chapter 7. Drills are targeted exercises. Drills focus on specific weaknesses or bottlenecks in your learning process, allowing you to improve these areas quickly and efficiently. Design effective drills. Effective drills isolate the exact problem, involve repetition, and increase in difficulty over time. They provide immediate feedback, helping you correct mistakes quickly. Feedback loops accelerate learning. Drills create a feedback loop that allows you to identify mistakes and adjust your approach, speeding up the learning process. Balance drills and direct practice. Drills are powerful, but they must be balanced with direct practice to ensure that individual skills are integrated into real-world performance. Overlearning for mastery. Overlearning ensures that a skill is deeply ingrained and can be performed effortlessly, even under pressure. This chapter provides a practical, hands-on approach to improving your learning by focusing on the areas that matter most. Through targeted drills and effective feedback, you can sharpen your skills and push through barriers on your way to mastery. Chapter 8, Principle 5, Retrieval. In Chapter 8, Scott Young introduces the principle of retrieval, a powerful learning technique that focuses on recalling information rather than simply reviewing it. While traditional study methods emphasize rereading and note-taking, ultralearners understand that true mastery comes from pulling knowledge out of their brains, not just putting it in. This chapter explains why retrieval is such a crucial part of the ultralearning process and how to incorporate it into your study routine to significantly boost memory and understanding. What is retrieval? Retrieval, as Scott explains, is the act of recalling information or skills from memory. This technique forces your brain to actively reconstruct what you've learned, rather than passively absorbing information. The key difference between retrieval and more common study methods like REAR, eating or highlighting, is that retrieval strengthens the neural pathways that help you remember and use knowledge when you need it. For example, instead of rereading a textbook chapter, you could close the book and try to write a summary from memory. This act of pulling the information from your brain rather than reading it again helps you internalize the material more effectively. Why retrieval works. Scott dives into the science of why retrieval is so effective. When you engage in retrieval, you're essentially practicing how you'll use the information in real-world scenarios. Your brain has to work harder to recall details, and this effort reinforces the memory, making it easier to access later. This process is often called the testing effect. Studies have shown that students who practice retrieval by testing themselves retain far more information than those who simply review the material. This is why retrieval-based learning is a core strategy for ultralearners. It ensures that knowledge is not only stored in short-term memory, but transferred to long-term memory where it can be accessed whenever needed. Common mistakes in learning. One of the biggest mistakes learners make, Scott explains, is confusing familiarity with mastery. When you reread material, it often feels familiar, giving you the false impression that you've learned it. However, this passive approach doesn't necessarily mean the information is deeply understood or easily retrievable when needed. Retrieval solves this problem by forcing you to prove to yourself that you can recall and use the information without relying on external prompts. It's a more challenging approach, but one that ensures long-term retention and deep understanding. The retrieval practice process. Scott outlines a straightforward process for incorporating retrieval into your learning routine. Test yourself regularly. The simplest way to use retrieval is by testing yourself. This could be as simple as trying to recall facts, concepts, or procedures without looking at your notes or textbook. If you're learning a new language, quiz yourself on vocabulary. If you're studying history, try to recount key events without peeking at the timeline. Use flashcards. Flashcards are a powerful retrieval tool, especially for memorizing facts, vocabulary, or concepts. Scott recommends using spaced repetition systems, like Anki or Quizlet, which help you practice retrieval over increasing intervals of time. This approach ensures that you're not just cramming, but truly retaining information for the long term. Explain it to someone else. Another effective retrieval method is teaching. If you can explain a concept clearly to another person, you've truly understood it. Scott recommends this technique as a way to reinforce your knowledge and identify any gaps in your understanding. Create practice problems. For more technical subjects like math or coding, create practice problems that force you to apply what you've learned. By solving problems from memory, you engage in retrieval and gain a clearer sense of your strengths and weaknesses. The power of failure in retrieval. Scott emphasizes that retrieval is difficult, and that's the point. You will make mistakes and get things wrong, but that's a crucial part of the process. Every time you fail to recall something, you're giving your brain the opportunity to learn and correct the mistake. The more effort it takes to retrieve a piece of information, the stronger the memory becomes. This is why Scott encourages learners not to fear failure in retrieval practice. Mistakes are a sign that your brain is working to fill the gaps, and the discomfort you feel is actually a sign of progress. Spaced repetition, a perfect match for retrieval. Scott introduces the concept of spaced repetition, which complements retrieval by ensuring that you review material at optimal intervals. The idea is to space out your practice so that you're not reviewing information on too frequently or too infrequently. Spaced repetition helps you focus on material that is on the verge of being forgotten, which is when retrieval practice is most effective. Tools like Anki automate this process, showing you flashcards just as you're about to forget them, making the act of retrieval more efficient and powerful. Case study. Roger Craig, Jeopardy champion and retrieval expert. One of the most compelling examples of the power of retrieval comes from Roger Craig, a Jeopardy champion who set records with his high scores. Craig didn't rely solely on rote memorization to prepare for the quiz show. He used retrieval and spaced repetition to boost his recall of trivia. By turning his study materials into a series of flashcards, Craig tested himself repeatedly and used spaced repetition software to manage his review schedule. This retrieval-based approach helped him outperform other contestants, proving that active recall is one of the most efficient ways to master vast amounts of information. Balancing retrieval and review. While retrieval is crucial, Scott notes that review still has its place in learning. After all, before you can recall information, you need to have learned it in the first place. The key is balancing both review and retrieval in a way that supports long-term retention. Start by learning new material through active study, then shift your focus to retrieval as you progress. How to get started with retrieval. Scott offers a practical roadmap for incorporating retrieval into your own ultralearning projects. Turn your notes into questions. After studying, take your notes and turn them into questions that you can test yourself on. This way, instead of passively reading, you'll be actively trying to retrieve the key concepts. Schedule regular review sessions. Build retrieval practice into your schedule, ideally using spaced repetition. Whether it's once a day, once a week, or even once a month, regular retrieval practice ensures that you're constantly reinforcing what you've learned. Use feedback to improve. Pay attention to where you struggle during retrieval practice. This will highlight areas where you need to spend more time, helping you to focus your efforts on your weaknesses. Key points of Chapter 8. Retrieval is active learning. Retrieval involves recalling information from memory rather than passively reviewing it. This method strengthens your ability to remember and use information when it matters. The testing effect. Studies show that testing yourself through retrieval is far more effective for long-term retention than passive review methods like rereading or highlighting. Mistakes are part of the process. Failing to recall something isn't a setback. It's an essential part of learning. The harder it is to retrieve information, the stronger the memory becomes when you eventually succeed. Spaced repetition maximizes retrieval. Using spaced repetition tools like Anki ensures that you review material at the right intervals, optimizing your retrieval practice and improving retention. Explain and teach. One of the best ways to enhance retrieval is by explaining concepts to others. Teaching forces you to actively retrieve and solidify your understanding. This chapter emphasizes the critical role retrieval plays in the learning process. By making retrieval a core part of your study routine, you can significantly boost your memory, understanding, and overall mastery of any subject. Chapter 9. Principle 6. Feedback. In this chapter, Scott Young dives into the sixth principle of ultralearning, feedback. Feedback is the crucial mechanism that helps you know whether you're improving or making mistakes in your learning journey. Without feedback, progress is slow or stagnant. This chapter explores the different types of feedback, how to seek it, and how to use it effectively to continuously refine your skills and knowledge. Why feedback is essential. Feedback is one of the most powerful tools for improving any skill. Whether you're learning a language, programming, or trying to improve your public speaking, feedback gives you an external perspective that can help identify areas where you're going wrong. Scott emphasizes that feedback is like a mirror. It reflects the reality of your current performance and helps you adjust and improve. Feedback isn't just about being told when you're wrong. It's about understanding why you're wrong and how to fix it. This process allows learners to course correct more efficiently, speeding up the path to mastery. Ultralearners actively seek feedback and embrace it, using it to make rapid, informed adjustments to their approach. 3 types of feedback. Scott breaks down feedback into 3 main types, each serving a different purpose. Outcome feedback. This is the simplest type of feedback, where you get information about whether you've succeeded or failed at a task. Outcome feedback tells you the end result, whether you got the answer right or wrong, or if your project was a success or a failure. While useful, it doesn't provide enough detail to help you understand why you got that result. Informational feedback. This type of feedback digs deeper, explaining the why behind your performance. For example, if you're learning to play the piano and you hit the wrong note, informational feedback might explain that your finger placement was off. Informational feedback helps you understand the underlying reasons for mistakes, allowing you to make targeted improvements. Corrective feedback, the most powerful form of feedback. Corrective feedback not only tells you what went wrong, but also provides specific guidance on how to fix it. For instance, a coach might tell you, your shooting form is incorrect because you're not following through properly. Try bending your wrist at the end. This type of feedback is invaluable because it provides actionable steps to correct mistakes. The fear of feedback. Scott acknowledges that many learners avoid seeking feedback because it can be uncomfortable or discouraging. Nobody likes to hear that they're wrong or that they've made a mistake, but ultralearners understand that discomfort is part of the learning process. In fact, Scott argues that avoiding feedback is one of the biggest barriers to improvement. By reframing feedback as a tool for growth rather than a judgment of your abilities, you can overcome the fear of seeking it. The more feedback you receive, the more you can adjust, refine, and improve, making it a crucial element of ultralearning. How to actively seek feedback. Ultralearners don't wait for feedback to come to them. They actively pursue it. Scott offers several strategies for how you can do the same. Use immediate feedback loops. Wherever possible, set up immediate feedback loops so you can correct mistakes in real time. For example, if you're coding, you can run your code frequently to see if it works or if there's an error. If you're learning a language, practice speaking with a native speaker who can correct you instantly. Immediate feedback helps you fix mistakes faster, ensuring they don't become ingrained habits. Ask for specific feedback. General feedback like, good job, or you need to improve, isn't particularly helpful. Instead, ask for specific feedback on particular areas you want to improve. For instance, if you're practicing public speaking, ask your audience to comment specifically on your pacing or clarity rather than just overall performance. Seek feedback from experts. Experts in your field can provide some of the most valuable feedback because they've already mastered the skills you're trying to learn. Scott suggests finding mentors, coaches, or peers with more experience to give you detailed feedback and insights that you might not be able to get from self-assessment alone. Embrace negative feedback. Negative feedback can be tough to swallow, but it's often the most useful for growth. Ultralearners understand that criticism is not an attack, it's an opportunity to learn. By accepting negative feedback with an open mind, you can turn mistakes into valuable learning experiences. Feedback and deliberate practice. Scott highlights how feedback is essential to deliberate practice, a concept often discussed in the context of skill mastery. Deliberate practice involves working on your weaknesses, but you can't identify those weaknesses without feedback. It's not enough to simply practice over and over again. You need to know what you're doing wrong and how to improve. Feedback helps you fine-tune your practice sessions, ensuring that you're focusing on the right areas. By constantly incorporating feedback into your practice, you avoid the trap of repeating mistakes or reinforcing bad habits. The danger of over-reliance on feedback. While feedback is crucial, Scott also warns of the danger of becoming overly reliant on it. If you constantly rely on external feedback without developing the ability to self-correct, you might struggle to improve independently. Ultralearners use feedback as a guide, but also work on developing internal feedback mechanisms, learning to recognize their own mistakes and adjust on their own. For example, a chess player might initially rely on a coach to point out mistakes, but over time, they develop the ability to analyze their own games and spot weaknesses. This ability to self-assess and self-correct is an advanced form of feedback that leads to greater independence in learning. Case study: Raymond Teller, Mastering Magic with Feedback. Scott shares the story of Raymond Teller, one half of the famous magic duo Penn and Teller, as an example of how powerful feedback can be. Teller was meticulous in seeking feedback to perfect his performances, whether from fellow magicians, directors, or even the audience. One of his most successful tricks involved creating an illusion so convincing that he needed feedback from laypeople to refine the illusion's realism. By constantly refining his act based on audience reactions, Teller honed his magic performances to perfection. His success illustrates how detailed, consistent feedback can transform a skill from good to great. Building a feedback-friendly environment. Creating an environment where feedback is readily available is essential for ultralearning. Scott suggests that learners surround themselves with opportunities for feedback, whether it's through peer groups, mentors, or even online forums where they can share their work for critique. The more open you are to feedback, the faster you'll improve. Key points of Chapter 9. 3 types of feedback. Outcome feedback tells you whether you succeeded or failed. Informational feedback explains why you got that result. Corrective feedback provides specific guidance on how to improve. Actively seek feedback. Don't wait for feedback to come to you. Create immediate feedback loops, ask for specific feedback, and seek input from experts to accelerate your learning. Embrace negative feedback. Negative feedback is often the most valuable for improvement. By welcoming criticism, you turn mistakes into opportunities for growth. Feedback fuels deliberate practice. Deliberate practice requires knowing what you need to improve. Feedback helps you identify those areas and ensures that you're practicing in a way that leads to real progress. Avoid over-reliance on external feedback. While external feedback is essential, learning to self-assess and correct your own mistakes is the ultimate goal. Over time, develop internal feedback mechanisms that allow you to improve independently. Feedback is a critical component of the ultralearning process, enabling learners to continuously adjust and improve. By actively seeking and using feedback, you can accelerate your learning and avoid reinforcing bad habits, pushing yourself closer to mastery in any skill. Chapter X, Principle 7, Retention. In Chapter 10, Scott Young introduced as the 7th principle of ultralearning, retention. Retention refers to your ability to remember and recall what you've learned over the long term. It's not enough to learn something quickly. You need to keep that knowledge accessible and usable for when you need it. This chapter focuses on the science of memory, why we forget, and how ultralearners use specific strategies to retain information for the long haul. Why retention matters. Retention is critical for anyone who wants to avoid the common pitfall of forgetting everything they've learned after a short period of time. Scott explains that one of the biggest challenges in learning is keeping knowledge fresh and accessible over long periods, especially when you're dealing with large amounts of complex information. Whether it's learning a new language, mastering a musical instrument, or studying a technical subject, retention is what turns short-term learning into long-term mastery. Scott points out that without a strategy for retention, much of what you learn can disappear, requiring you to constantly relearn the same material. This is inefficient and frustrating. By focusing on retention, you can ensure that your knowledge stays with you, ready for use whenever it's needed. The problem of forgetting. Scott introduces the forgetting curve, a concept developed by German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus. The forgetting curve shows that we rapidly lose information after we first learn it. Without reinforcement, most of what we learn can fade within days or weeks. This rapid decline in memory is why cramming for exams, for example, often leads to short-term success, but long-term failure to retain the information. Ultralearners, however, combat the forgetting curve by using specific strategies to reinforce memory over time. Scott emphasizes that memory is not just about recalling information, but about keeping it alive and accessible through regular practice. Key strategies for retention. Scott outlines several proven strategies that ultralearners use to retain information effectively. Spaced repetition. One of the most powerful tools for retention, spaced repetition involves reviewing information at increasing intervals. Instead of trying to remember everything at once, you revisit material just before you're likely to forget it. Tools like Anki, a spaced repetition software, help automate this process by showing you information at optimal intervals. This ensures that you're reinforcing your memory when it's most effective. Active recall. Active recall is the process of trying to remember information without looking at your notes or materials. This is a form of retrieval, but Scott highlights its importance for retention. When you force your brain to actively pull out information, you strengthen your ability to remember it in the future. Using flashcards, self-quizzing, or simply trying to recall facts from memory are all effective active recall strategies. Overlearning. Overlearning means practicing something beyond the point of basic proficiency. When you overlearn, you continue practicing until the information or skill is so deeply ingrained that you can recall it effortlessly. This technique is particularly useful for skills that require quick, reflexive responses, such as playing an instrument, performing in sports, or responding to questions in an interview. Interleaving practice. Interleaving involves mixing different types of practice rather than focusing on one skill or subject at a time. Scott explains that by alternating between different topics, you force your brain to adapt and strengthen its ability to retain and retrieve varied information. For example, if you're learning math, instead of practicing one type of problem repeatedly, you mix in different types of problems to challenge your brain to switch between concepts. Mnemonics and memory techniques. Mnemonics are memory aids that help you encode information in a way that makes it easier to remember. Scott suggests using visual imagery, acronyms, or associations to help lock information into long-term memory. For example, to remember the order of planets in the solar system, you might use the mnemonic, "My very educated mother just served us noodles," to recall the first letters of each planet's name. When to use retention strategies. Scott stresses that not every piece of information needs to be retained with the same level of intensity. Some skills or knowledge are only needed for a short time, while others are crucial for long-term mastery. He advises that you be selective about what information you apply retention strategies to, focusing most of your effort on knowledge that is essential for your goals. For instance, if you're studying for a certification exam, it's important to retain key concepts that will help you in your future career, rather than every small detail you encounter. By identifying the most important material, you can focus your retention strategies on what truly matters. Balancing retention and learning new material. One of the challenges of ultralearning is balancing the need to retain what you've already learned while continuing to acquire new information. Scott explains that as you accumulate knowledge, the effort required to maintain retention grows, which can slow down your ability to learn new things. To manage this, Scott recommends creating a system that includes regular review sessions as part of your learning routine. For example, you might dedicate a few hours each week to reviewing past material while still dedicating the majority of your time to learning new concepts. This balance ensures that you're constantly reinforcing your long-term memory without sacrificing the acquisition of new skills. Case study. Dr. Judd and the Surgical Skills Lab. To illustrate the importance of retention, Scott shares the story of Dr. Judd, a surgeon who ran a surgical skills lab for medical students. Dr. Judd was concerned that students would forget essential surgical techniques after learning them in the lab. To combat this, he developed a retention system that included spaced repetition and regular review sessions. By reinforcing key skills over time, Dr. Judd ensured that his students retained their knowledge and were able to perform at a high level when they entered the operating room. This case study demonstrates how crucial retention is in fields where forgotten information can lead to serious consequences. It also shows that with the right system, even highly complex skills can be retained over the long term. The role of forgetting in learning. Interestingly, Scott highlights that forgetting can actually play a role in solidifying retention. When you almost forget something but manage to recall it, the act of retrieval strengthens the memory even more. This is why spaced repetition is so effective. It gives you just enough time to almost forget the material before reinforcing it again, leading to a stronger memory. Rather than fearing forgetting, ultralearners embrace it as part of the learning process. The goal is not to prevent forgetting entirely, but to strategically combat it through regular practice and reinforcement. Key points of Chapter 10. Retention is key to mastery. Retention ensures that the knowledge you've gained stays with you long after the initial learning phase. Without retention, you risk losing progress and having to relearn the same material. The forgetting curve. Without reinforcement, we lose most of what we learn within days or weeks. Combating the forgetting curve requires active strategies like spaced repetition and active recall. Spaced repetition and active recall. These are two of the most powerful tools for retention. Spaced repetition helps you review material at optimal intervals, while active recall strengthens memory by forcing you to retrieve information without prompts. Overlearning and interleaving. Overlearning ensures that skills become automatic. Whiskly interleaving practice improves your brain's ability to switch between different topics and retain varied information. Selective retention. Focus your retention efforts on the most important material, balancing the need to review past knowledge with the desire to learn new things. This chapter emphasizes that learning isn't just about acquiring new information, it's about holding on to it. By employing these retention strategies, ultralearners ensure that their hard-earned knowledge is available when they need it, turning short-term learning into long-term mastery. Chapter 7, Principle 8, Intuition. In Chapter 11, Scott Young discusses the eighth principle of ultralearning, intuition. Intuition refers to the deep understanding of a subject that allows you to grasp complex ideas effortlessly and make quick, accurate decisions. While intuition is often seen as something natural or instinctive, Scott explains that it can be cultivated through deliberate practice and learning strategies. This chapter explores how ultralearners build their intuition and how you can develop your own to master challenging subjects. What is intuition? Scott describes intuition as the ability to understand concepts deeply without having to think through each step consciously. It's the feeling of just knowing something because your mind has absorbed it so thoroughly that it becomes second nature. In subjects like math, science, or even art, intuition allows experts to see patterns, make connections, and solve problems quickly, often without being fully aware of the process. For ultralearners, developing intuition means moving beyond rote memorization and surface-level understanding. It's about internalizing concepts so that you can apply them in new and unfamiliar situations, rather than just repeating what you've learned. How intuition develops. Intuition isn't something you're born with. It's something that develops over time through focused, deep learning. Scott explains that intuition comes from pattern recognition, the ability to see underlying structures in a subject. This happens after repeated exposure to problems, concepts, and challenges within a field. For example, chess grandmasters often make moves that seem intuitive, but their ability comes from years of studying the game and recognizing patterns on the board. In programming, experienced coders can spot bugs in their code quickly because they've seen similar problems before and developed a sense for where things might go wrong. Scott emphasizes that intuition is not magic. It's a skill built through experience, practice, and exposure to a wide range of scenarios. Developing intuition through overlearning. One of the most effective ways to build intuition is through overlearning, a concept introduced in the previous chapter. Overlearning involves practicing a skill beyond the point of basic proficiency so that it becomes second nature. By continuing to practice after you've mastered the basics, you deepen your understanding and start to develop intuition. For example, once you've learned the fundamentals of a new language, continuing to engage with native speakers and immerse yourself in real-world conversations helps you develop a feel for language that goes beyond the rules of grammar or vocabulary memorization. Drilling for intuition. Another method Scott suggests for developing intuition is through drills, specifically designed to target weak spots in your understanding. When you drill repeatedly on specific challenges, you force your brain to work through them until the solution feels automatic. This builds the neural connections that eventually lead to intuition. For example, a student struggling with calculus might drill specific problem types repeatedly until they can recognize patterns and solve problems without having to think through every step in detail. The power of analogies. Scott explains that one way to deepen intuition is by using analogies. Analogies help bridge the gap between unfamiliar concepts and things you already understand. By relating a new idea to something you're already familiar with, you can more easily grasp its underlying principles. For instance, comparing the flow of electricity to the flow of water through pipes can help you intuitively understand how circuits work. By making connections between different areas of knowledge, you build a more integrated understanding of complex topics. The struggle for intuition, productive failure. Developing intuition often requires struggling through difficult problems. Scott introduces the concept of productive failure, which is the idea that struggling with a challenging problem, even if you don't solve it right away, helps build intuition. The act of grappling with the material forces you to think deeply and make connections, even if the solution doesn't come easily. Scott emphasizes that ultra-learners embrace this struggle. They understand that failure and frustration are part of the process of building intuition. When you're forced to wrestle with a difficult problem, you're creating the mental framework that will allow you to solve similar problems more easily in the future. Case study: Richard Feynman and physics intuition. Scott highlights the legendary physicist Richard Feynman as a perfect example of someone who developed profound intuition in his field. Feynman was known for his ability to simplify complex concepts and explain them in clear, relatable terms. His deep intuition in physics allowed him to see through the complexities of the subject and understand its core principles. Feynman developed his intuition by constantly questioning, exploring, and playing with ideas. He would approach problems from multiple angles, often using analogies and thought experiments to deepen his understanding. Feynman's ability to explain quantum mechanics to non-experts showed that his mastery of the subject wasn't just theoretical. He had internalized the concepts so well that they became intuitive. Scott suggests that learners can adopt Feynman's approach by continuously questioning what they learn and seeking to explain it in simple terms. If you can break down a complex idea and explain it to someone with no background in the subject, you're on your way to developing strong intuition. Deep work and intuition. Scott emphasizes that building intuition requires deep work, a concept introduced by Cal Newport. Deep work involves focused, uninterrupted study or practice where you engage fully with the material. By dedicating time to deep work, you give your brain the space to process complex ideas and build the neural connections necessary for intuition. Distractions and multitasking prevent deep work from happening. To develop intuition, you need to carve out periods of time where you can focus entirely on the subject at hand without interruptions or distractions. Practical steps to build intuition. To help readers develop their own intuition, Scott outlines a few practical steps. Work on hard problems. Don't shy away from difficult challenges. The more you push yourself to solve tough problems, the more you strengthen your intuitive grasp of the material. This struggle helps you build the mental models necessary for intuitive thinking. Use analogies and visuals. When learning a new concept, find or create analogies that link the new information to something you already understand. Use visual representations whenever possible to help solidify your understanding. Explain concepts to others. One of the best ways to test your intuition is by explaining concepts to others. The process of teaching forces you to clarify your understanding and reveals gaps in your knowledge. Focus on patterns, not just facts. As you study, look for patterns and connections between ideas. Developing intuition is less about memorizing isolated facts and more about seeing how those facts fit together into a larger structure. Key points of Tier 11. Intuition is built through experience. Intuition comes from recognizing patterns and deeply understanding the underlying principles of a subject. It develops through repeated exposure and practice. Overlearning and drills. By practicing skills beyond basic proficiency, overlearning, and using targeted drills, you can develop intuition that allows you to solve problems instinctively. Productive failure. Struggling through difficult problems is essential for building intuition. The more you grapple with challenges, the more you build the mental framework needed for deep understanding. Use analogies and visuals. Analogies and visual representations help connect new ideas to concepts you already understand, accelerating the development of intuition. Deep work is crucial. Building intuition requires periods of uninterrupted focus. Deep work allows you to engage fully with complex ideas and build strong neural connections. This chapter teaches readers how to cultivate the kind of intuition that allows experts to solve complex problems quickly and accurately. By pushing through challenges, seeking patterns, and engaging in deep work, anyone can develop the intuitive understanding that leads to mastery. Chapter 12, Principle 9, Experimentation. In Chapter 12, Scott Young introduces the final ultra-learning principle, experimentation. This principle encourages learners to step outside their comfort zones and explore new techniques, methods, and approaches to learning. Experimentation is essential for overcoming plateaus, discovering better ways to learn, and pushing the boundaries of your capabilities. In this chapter, Scott explains why ultralearners constantly experiment and how this principle leads to innovation and faster mastery. What is experimentation? Experimentation, in the context of ultralearning, involves trying new things, testing different approaches, and being willing to make mistakes in the pursuit of improvement. Scott emphasizes that experimentation is about more than just trial and error. It's a deliberate and structured process of exploring alternative methods to optimize learning. This approach allows ultralearners to avoid stagnation and continuously improve their skills and knowledge. Experimentation is particularly valuable when you've reached a plateau in your learning. When progress slows down, trying a new strategy or technique can help you break through and continue growing. Ultralearners don't just stick to one method. They're always looking for better, more efficient ways to learn. The role of creativity in experimentation. Scott highlights the importance of creativity in the experimentation process. Ultralearners are not afraid to think outside the box and question conventional wisdom. They test unorthodox methods, seek out new tools, and even invent their own learning techniques. This creative experimentation often leads to breakthroughs that wouldn't happen if you only followed standard practices. For example, if you're learning a language, you might experiment with different ways of immersing yourself in the language, such as watching TV shows, listening to podcasts, or speaking with native speakers. By trying various approaches, you discover what works best for you and adapt your learning strategy accordingly. The scientific method and experimentation. Scott suggests thinking of experimentation like the scientific method. You start with a hypothesis, an idea or technique you want to try. Test it, gather data, feedback, and then make adjustments based on what you learn. This iterative process allows you to refine your approach over time. Ultralearners who embrace this mindset are constantly testing new strategies and gathering feedback from their experiments. Whether it's trying a different time of day for study, a new memorization technique, or an alternative method for practicing a skill, these small experiments provide valuable insights into how you learn best. 2 types of experimentation. Scott identifies 2 types of experimentation that ultralearners engage in. Macro experiments. These are larger, more significant experiments that involve changing your entire approach to learning. For example, Scott's MIT challenge, where he attempted to learn MIT's computer science curriculum in 1 year, was a macro experiment. He radically changed how he approached education by designing his own learning structure outside of traditional university settings. Micro experiments. These are smaller, more frequent experiments that focus on specific aspects of your learning process. For example, experimenting with different note-taking methods, testing out various memorization techniques, or altering your daily schedule to find when you're most productive. These small changes can have a cumulative impact over time. Both types of experiments are valuable, and Scott encourages learners to integrate both into their ultralearning projects. The value of failure in experimentation. Scott emphasizes that failure is an inherent part of experimentation. When you try something new, there's a good chance it won't work as expected. However, ultralearners view failure as an opportunity to learn. Each failed experiment provides valuable feedback about what doesn't work, allowing you to make adjustments and improve. The key is to approach experimentation with a mindset of curiosity and openness, rather than fear of failure. Ultralearners understand that failure is part of the process of finding better solutions. The goal is to experiment frequently, analyze the results, and iterate based on what you've learned. Case study: Vincent van Gogh, experimenting with artistic styles. Scott uses Vincent van Gogh's artistic journey as a prime example of experimentation in practice. Van Gogh didn't start painting until he was 27, and for much of his early career, he struggled with basic drawing and painting techniques. However, he was relentless in his experimentation, constantly trying new methods, studying different styles, and exploring various media. Van Gogh's willingness to experiment, even when facing criticism, allowed him to develop his signature style: bold colors, thick brushstrokes, and swirling forms. This approach, which initially seemed unconventional, ultimately made him one of the most famous artists of all time. His experimentation led to breakthroughs in the way he expressed emotion and movement on canvas. Scott suggests that learners adopt the same experimental mindset. By pushing the boundaries of conventional methods, you open yourself up to new possibilities and discoveries. 3 types of experimentation in learning. Scott identifies 3 specific ways you can experiment with your learning process. Experiment with learning resources. Try out different books, courses, videos, or tutorials. Don't rely on just one source of information. Explore multiple avenues to see which provides the most value. Experiment with techniques. Test different learning techniques, such as retrieval practice, spaced repetition, or visualization. See which methods help you retain information best and adapt your study routine accordingly. Experiment with environment. Your learning environment can have a big impact on your productivity. Experiment with studying in different locations, changing the time of day you learn, or adjusting your surroundings to see what helps you focus and absorb information better. The mindset of a constant experimenter. Scott explains that ultralearners approach every learning project with the mindset of a constant experimenter. They're never fully satisfied with their current methods and are always looking for ways to improve. This doesn't mean they abandon successful strategies, but they remain open to the idea that there might be an even better approach out there. The key to successful experimentation is maintaining a balance between sticking with what works and being willing to try new things. Ultralearners keep what works, discard what doesn't, and constantly iterate on their learning process. Case study: Tim Ferriss, Language Learning and Experimentation. Scott highlights Tim Ferriss, the best-selling author and productivity expert, as another example of someone who used experimentation to master difficult subjects. Ferriss is known for his approach to learning new languages quickly, using unorthodox methods to maximize efficiency. For example, he focused on learning just the most commonly used words and phrases in a language, rather than trying to memorize an entire dictionary. Ferriss's success in learning languages came from his willingness to experiment with different methods, discard the ones that didn't work, and refine the ones that did. This approach allowed him to make rapid progress in areas that would take most people far longer to master. Key points of Chapter 12. Experimentation drives progress. Ultralearners constantly test new approaches, methods, and techniques to find what works best. This mindset of experimentation helps them overcome plateaus and discover more efficient ways to learn. Failure is part of the process. Failure is a natural part of experimentation. Each failed experiment provides feedback that helps refine your learning process and brings you closer to success. Macro and micro experiments. Macro experiments involve significant changes to your learning approach, while micro experiments focus on small, incremental adjustments. Both are important for growth. Creativity and innovation. Ultralearners are creative and open to unorthodox methods. By thinking outside the box and questioning conventional learning methods, they find new ways to make faster progress. Iterate and improve. The process of experimentation is iterative. Test, learn from the results, adjust, and repeat. This cycle allows learners to continuously improve and optimize their learning strategies. This chapter encourages readers to adopt a mindset of experimentation in their learning journeys. By pushing the boundaries, testing new approaches, and embracing failure, ultralearners can accelerate their mastery and unlock new levels of potential. Chapter 3. Your first ultralearning project. In Chapter 13, Scott Young shifts from principles to action, guiding readers through the process of planning and executing their first ultralearning project. This chapter is all about putting the ultralearning principles into practice, from choosing the right project to creating a detailed plan and maintaining momentum throughout the process. Scott walks you through step-by-step instructions to help you get started on your own learning journey, using the strategies covered in the book to achieve mastery. Why you should start your own ultralearning project. Scott emphasizes that starting an ultralearning project is one of the most rewarding and transformative things you can do. It's not just about learning a new skill. It's about challenging yourself to grow, pushing the boundaries of what you believe is possible, and taking control of your own education. Whether you want to learn a language, master a professional skill, or pursue a personal interest, an ultra-learning project can help you achieve it faster and more efficiently than traditional methods. The real benefit of ultra-learning isn't just the skill itself. It's the confidence you gain from knowing you can tackle hard things and teach yourself anything. Once you've completed one ultra-learning project, the possibilities for future projects become limitless. Step 1. Choose your project. The first step in starting an ultra-learning project is deciding what you want to learn. Scott advises picking something that excites you and aligns with your long-term goals, whether personal or professional. Ultra-learning projects require dedication and effort, so it's important to choose a subject or skill that you're genuinely passionate about. Scott suggests focusing on skills or knowledge that will make a meaningful impact on your life, either by advancing your career, improving your personal life, or helping you reach a specific goal. For example, you might want to learn a new language to travel or work abroad, or master a programming language to switch careers. Step 2. Set clear, specific goals. Once you've chosen your subject, the next step is to define your goals. Scott stresses the importance of making your goals specific and measurable. Rather than setting vague goals like learn French or get better at programming, break your project down into concrete outcomes, such as be able to hold a 15-minute conversation in French or build a fully functional website using JavaScript. Clear goals not only give you direction, but also allow you to measure your progress along the way. Scott encourages you to think of your ultra-learning project as a challenge with an endpoint, a clear indicator of success. This helps keep you motivated and focused. Step 3. Create a learning plan. Now that you have a goal, it's time to develop a plan for achieving it. Scott introduces the idea of meta-learning, which was covered earlier in the book, to guide your planning process. Start by doing research on your subject. Find out what resources are available, what methods work best, and what other successful learners have done. This helps you map out your approach to the project. Your plan should include key milestones, timelines, and resources. Break your goal down into smaller steps and schedule time for learning and practice. Scott advises being realistic about your time commitment, but also encourages you to set ambitious goals that push your limits. Step 4. Focus and manage distractions. Ultra-learning requires intense focus, and managing distractions is key to staying on track. Scott reiterates the importance of creating a distraction-free environment and setting specific times for focused study or practice. Time blocking, scheduling periods of uninterrupted work, can help you maintain the concentration needed for deep learning. In this phase, you'll need to balance learning with real-world practice, engaging in the directness principle by applying what you're learning as soon as possible. Avoid getting lost in passive learning like excessive reading or watching videos. Your plan should prioritize active, hands-on practice that directly builds the skills you're working to master. Step 5. Drill your weaknesses. Drilling, another key ultra-learning principle, is essential to refining your abilities and addressing weak points. As you progress through your project, you'll encounter areas where you struggle. This is where drills come in. Design exercises that focus specifically on those weak spots. For example, if you're learning a language and find that your listening comprehension is weak, create drills that focus on listening to native speakers. If you're learning programming and struggle with debugging, set aside time to focus specifically on solving bugs. By drilling your weaknesses, you accelerate your progress and prevent yourself from plateauing. Step 6. Seek feedback. Feedback is crucial to ensuring that you're on the right track. Throughout your project, actively seek feedback from mentors, peers, or even from the results of your own practice. This will help you identify mistakes, correct misunderstandings, and fine-tune your skills. Scott advises being open to criticism and embracing negative feedback as a learning tool. Whether it's getting feedback from a teacher, an online community, or your own self-assessment, feedback will help guide your project and ensure that you're making meaningful progress. Step 7. Track progress and adjust. One of the keys to a successful ultra-learning project is tracking your progress. As you move through your learning plan, make sure to measure your improvements and reflect on how far you've come. Scott recommends using a journal or digital tracker to log your learning sessions, milestones, and breakthroughs. If you notice that certain methods aren't working or that you're not progressing as quickly as you'd like, don't be afraid to adjust your plan. Ultralearning projects should be flexible, allowing you to tweak your approach based on what you learn along the way. Step 8. Execute and finish strong. The final step is execution, putting your plan into action and following through to completion. Scott stresses the importance of maintaining momentum and pushing yourself to finish your project, even when it gets challenging. Consistency and persistence are key. As you near the end of your project, you'll feel the payoff from all your hard work. Whether it's successfully holding a conversation in your target language, completing a personal project, or achieving a career milestone, the sense of accomplishment from completing an ultralearning project is profound. Reflect on your success. After you've completed your project, take time to reflect on what you've learned, not just in terms of the subject matter, but about the learning process itself. What worked well? What could have been done differently? This reflection helps you refine your approach for future ultralearning projects and solidifies the principles you've practiced. Key points of Chapter 13. Choose a meaningful project. Select a subject or skill that excites you and aligns with your personal or professional goals. Ultralearning projects require passion and dedication. Set specific, measurable goals. Define clear outcomes that will allow you to track your progress and know when you've succeeded. Vague goals lead to vague results. Develop a learning plan. Use meta-learning principles to map out a structured approach to your project. Break your goal into smaller milestones and be realistic about time commitments. Maintain focus and avoid distractions. Create a distraction-free environment and schedule focused learning sessions. Prioritize hands-on practice and real-world application over passive learning. Drill your weaknesses and seek feedback. Use drills to target areas where you struggle and actively seek feedback to ensure you're on the right track. Don't shy away from negative feedback. It's essential for growth. Track progress and adjust as needed. Measure your progress regularly and be willing to adjust your plan if necessary. Flexibility is key to overcoming challenges and maintaining momentum. Finish strong. Push through to the end of your project. The sense of accomplishment from completing an ultralearning challenge is a reward in itself, and it sets the stage for future learning success. This chapter provides readers with a practical roadmap for starting and completing their first ultralearning project. By following these steps and embracing the principles discussed throughout the book, you can embark on your own journey to rapid skill acquisition and personal growth. Chapter 14. An Unconventional Education. In the final chapter, Scott Young takes a broader view of ultralearning, exploring how the principles of self-directed, intense learning can challenge traditional notions of education. In An Unconventional Education, he reflects on how ultralearning has the potential to reshape how we think about learning, success, and the future of education. This chapter encourages readers to see ultralearning not just as a tool for personal mastery, but as a way to redefine what it means to be educated in the modern world. The limitations of conventional education. Scott begins by discussing the limitations of the traditional education system. While schools and universities have long been seen as the main path to knowledge and career success, Scott points out that formal education is often slow, expensive, and doesn't always equip students with the practical skills they need for the real world. Many people graduate with degrees, yet feel unprepared for the job market or for solving real-world problems. Scott argues that conventional education tends to emphasize passive learning, lectures, textbooks, and exams over direct, hands-on experience, which is a core principle of ultralearning. The rise of self-directed learning. Scott explains that ultralearning is part of a larger movement towards self-directed education, where individuals take control of their own learning rather than relying solely on institutions. With the vast array of resources available today, online courses, tutorials, books, videos, and communities, anyone can design their own educational path. This democratization of learning means that knowledge and skills are no longer confined to those who can afford expensive degrees or have access to elite schools. Ultralearners embrace this new reality, crafting their own learning journeys and focusing on practical skills that can be applied immediately. Scott highlights how the internet has made it easier than ever to become self-educated, with access to high-quality materials on almost any subject, from programming to art to languages. Examples of unconventional learning paths. Scott presents real-life examples of people who have achieved remarkable success by rejecting traditional education and instead opting for unconventional, self-directed learning paths. Judith Polgar, chess grandmaster. One of the world's greatest chess players, Judith Polgar, was educated in a non-traditional way by her father, Laszlo Polgar. Instead of attending a formal school, Judith and her sisters were trained intensively in chess from a very young age. Laszlo believed that geniuses were made, not born, and his unconventional approach to education helped his daughters become world-class players. This case exemplifies how focused direct learning in a specific field can lead to mastery without following the standard educational route. Tim Ferriss, language learning. Scott also revisits Tim Ferriss, who achieved fluency in several languages using unconventional learning methods. Rather than enrolling in traditional language courses, Ferriss used ultra-learning strategies like intensive practice, immersion, and experimentation to learn quickly and efficiently. His success illustrates how ultra-learning can lead to rapid skill acquisition, even in areas that are traditionally seen as difficult to master. Benny Lewis, fluent in 3 months. Another example is Benny Lewis, the language hacker who became fluent in several languages through self-directed, immersion-based learning. Instead of spending years in language classes, Benny traveled to countries where his target language was spoken, forcing himself to practice directly with native speakers. His ultra-learning approach allowed him to learn languages far faster than traditional methods would suggest. Rethinking the purpose of education. Scott challenges the reader to rethink what education is for. Is it just about acquiring a degree or diploma, or is it about mastering valuable skills that improve your life and career? He argues that ultra-learning allows people to focus on the skills that matter most, regardless of the formal credentials that are typically associated with education. For Scott, education should be about competence, not just credentials. Ultra-learners prioritize the ability to do something, whether it's speaking a language, coding a program, or mastering a subject, over simply having a piece of paper that says they've completed a course. This shift in perspective changes the way we value education, placing more emphasis on practical outcomes than on formal qualifications. The ultra-learning revolution. Scott envisions a future where ultra-learning becomes more common and accepted, especially as technology continues to transform industries and the job market. He predicts that as people see the success of ultra-learners who are able to adapt quickly, teach themselves new skills, and thrive in rapidly changing environments, the traditional education system will be forced to evolve. In this future, self-direct, ed-learning, flexible educational paths, and lifelong learning will become the norm. The pace of change in the modern world, driven by technological advancements, means that skills learned in a traditional classroom may become outdated quickly. Ultralearning, by contrast, emphasizes adaptability, rapid learning, and the ability to constantly acquire new knowledge, making it a perfect fit for this fast-changing landscape. A call to action. The chapter concludes with a call to action for readers. Take control of your own education. Scott encourages readers to break free from the mindset that formal education is the only way to learn or succeed. Instead, he advocates for a proactive, ultra-learning approach, where individuals define their own learning goals, seek out the best resources, and take responsibility for their growth. Whether it's mastering a new skill for career advancement, pursuing a passion project, or simply becoming a more effective learner, ultra-learning offers a roadmap for achieving your goals on your own terms. Scott's message is clear. You don't need permission from institutions or experts to learn. With the right mindset and strategy, you can become an ultra-learner and redefine your own education. Key points of Chapter 14, the limits of traditional education. Conventional education systems often fail to equip students with practical skills and can be slow and expensive. Ultralearning offers an alternative that focuses on direct application and self-directed learning. The rise of self-education. With access to free and affordable online resources, anyone can design their own learning path. Ultralearners take full advantage of these tools to learn faster and more efficiently. Unconventional learning success stories. Examples like Judith Polgar, Tim Ferriss, and Benny Lewis show how self-directed learning can lead to mastery in fields as diverse as chess, languages, and business without relying on formal education. Education for competence, not credentials. Ultralearners prioritize mastering skills over earning degrees or certificates. The focus is on what you can do, not what qualifications you have. A changing educational landscape. Scott predicts that as ultralearning becomes more widespread, traditional education systems will need to adapt to the demands of a rapidly changing world. Lifelong, self-directed learning will become more important than ever. Take control of your education. Scott urges readers to take charge of their own learning journeys. By embracing ultralearning principles, you can achieve your goals and redefine what it means to be educated. This final chapter inspires readers to think beyond the boundaries of traditional education and consider the power of ultralearning as a way to achieve personal and professional mastery. It's a fitting conclusion to the book, challenging the reader to take action and pursue their own unconventional education. And that's a wrap on ultralearning. I hope you're as inspired as I am to take your learning to the next level. With the right mindset and strategy, you can master any skill and take charge of your education, one ultralearning project at a time. If you're ready to start your own journey, make sure to leave a comment below and share what you're planning to learn next. Don't forget to subscribe to Read a Book a Day for more book summaries that help you level up your life, one book at a time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.